Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another thing where I talk about things. Today, I'd like to talk about the Skellingrim campaign. Before we start though, I've got a little bit of allergy stuff going on. I saw my girlfriend today, and I'm allergic to animals. Like, I like animals very much, but I'm rather allergic to them, some worse than others. Dogs, not so bad, but I still get the itchy eyes and a little bit of the runny nose and everything like that. So hopefully won't be an issue, but yes, I'm doing this video with a little bit of allergy trouble. But anyway, though, so the Skellingrim campaign. I talked about whether or not I was going to go into politics. There still hasn't been a whole lot of real developments. I've been keeping track of the news and trying to watch what's going on. Like, so far, just like cabinet appointments and things like that. And most of what's going on in politics right now is drama outside the Beltway, feels like. I mean, like, there's drama in the Beltway, but you know, like, the internet is just freaking out. Like, it's like the safety pin thing. There's like schools banning safety pins because it was a political statement. It's super weird. Like, I don't know, the politics stuff. Like I say, I haven't seen any developments that are worth commenting on yet. There's stuff that could be interesting to talk about, but nothing that's like, oh, you know, this is a monumental change with a whole ton of implications right off the bat. Yeah, I don't know. Everybody's kind of gearing up for what's going to happen. But yeah, still no political thing today. We're going to keep going with the Skellingrim campaign. And where we left off, we had just defeated a bunch of pixies. They'd torn apart their little mushroom homes and rejected their mushroom wives. They decided to go with retrieving the anklet, which they were sent to carry in the first place. Oh, I should point out that Skellingrim, the black wizard who gave everyone the anklet, he departed from the group right off the bat, because that's what wizards freaking do. They just say, here's your journey, here you go, and then they just vanish off to go do wizard things. So Skellingrim, he actually explains, he goes, I have to go do wizard things, and then he just teleports away and he's gone. And so, yeah, so the group is traveling alone, Skellingrim is not with them. And anyway, the next stop, and I got a little ahead of myself last time, I was explaining that they went to the forest. This is when they go to the forest. The original plan was I thought that they were going to take a straight shot to the forest, and I had like this dryad that was going to get all crabby because they were walking around the forest like with their weapons and everything like that. And if you ever travel through a forest, like one that's not been prepared for people, you'll find that pretty much the only way to get around is by following like deer paths and things like that, and those meander around all over the place. Otherwise, you have to have a machete and kind of just blaze your own trail. You know, woods can get pretty thick. So this was going to be a very thick set of woods. It was very close to like the forest elven civilization. You know, forest elves being a bunch of crabby elves that live in isolation and at one with nature and all that. The party never really interacted with the forest elves, so it didn't come up too much. But I originally thought they were just going to cut straight through the forest and head to the next checkpoint. But they had bought this cart. And I can't remember I think that they were just pulling it because they looked at like there was at least like 2 party members with very high strength, you know, higher strength than like oxen, because D&D is like that. Like an ox has a strength of, I don't know, like 16 or something like that, or maybe a horse does. I don't know. Strength is funny. Like, you go up to 18, and 18 is considered like really high, but a lot of characters, if they go for like 18 strength, they can pretty much get 18 strength. So it was like there were 2 characters that were strong enough, I'm pretty sure, that could just carry the thing, and they were better and like more durable than ox. So it was just like, okay, yeah, fine, you guys are the oxen for the cart, whatever. And I don't think that they were actually like keeping anything in the cart. I think it was just for like the potential benefit of like, what if we need to carry a bunch of junk? So they tried to go around the forest as well as they could, and they traveled up north to a river, and they found out that the path was a little bit clearer along the river, but not so clear that they could freely just navigate a cart like alongside it all the way up to where they were going. So what they did, and this is actually kind of funny because I believe that they were actually going to go back like way later in the campaign. They actually came back through that area again, and they were discussing like, hey guys, should we go check on that cart that we left? What they did is they parked the cart somewhere, and then they took the wheels off, and I can't remember who had the wheels with them, but for the rest of the campaign, somebody was carrying around like a wagon wheel or something like that on their back. I believe it might have been Serena, but I think at some point she was eventually just carrying a barrel. I don't know. Somebody, one of the oxen characters was they were carrying around like a wagon wheel for the whole rest of the campaign, and it never really came up because like everyone kind of forgot about it. But it was just like, yeah, can I just strap this to my back and have it? And I was like, yeah, okay, sure, fine. And so they just carried around this wagon wheel for the rest of the campaign. No one was gonna steal this wagon, darn it! You can't steal a useless wagon when it has no wheels. So yeah. So anyway, they start walking off into the woods, following the river. Essentially, they're going to their next checkpoint. Which is actually a little bit in the woods, which means that they followed the river for a ways, and then they had to kind of go off into the woods. And when they do so, they got attacked by forest goblins. Like they're walking around kind of in this little area. They're in like the low ground, this little rut that they're following that's got fewer trees. And so goblins come up on the sides, and they attack them with I think like blow darts and things like that. And the goblins had a bunch of various poisons and things like that, but they weren't really using them. What they tried to do instead is the goblins came down and they tried to like grab somebody, hog tie them real fast, and run away with them. And I think they almost got one or two party members, but it was really more like it wasn't like they had the upper hand. The goblins were like losing and badly. The trouble was that they just grabbed someone, and the party wasn't like a cohesive team at that time. There were 12 players, but most of them weren't familiar with role-playing, and so it was kind of just chaos. So in the chaos, like one or two people got tied up, and like one person like got tied up and then rescued, and then another person got tied up and dragged away and then rescued. But the goblins, realizing that they were losing and how badly they were losing, gave up and they ran for the hills, which caused one of the players, I believe Serena, in fact, I'm sure it was Serena, to run off into the woods after them, wielding the axe and planning to cut each and every single one of the goblins down one at a time. So she manages to hone in on one of the goblins, who does his best to outrun her on his short little legs for a long time. He was more nimble through the woods, and so he was like hopping around, like diving under little like brambles and things like that, trying to lose Serena. And I had Serena roll a athletics check or something like that, and eventually she catches up to this little guy. But like I'm telling him, I'm telling the player, as you're chasing this goblin, you know, he's making a lot of hooping and hollering noises, and you're hearing like some echoes back of this stuff, and so Serena's like, I don't care, I'm gonna catch him. Let his friends come, I'll catch them too. And so she catches the goblin, and he turns around and he blows a bunch of poison in Serena's face, and I believe she kills him anyway. It takes a while for the poison to kick in. But after the goblin is dead, you know, she starts to get like dizzy and just like, you know, I was having her take constitution rolls, and I was like, okay, yeah, so you start to get really dizzy and really disoriented, and then you're surrounded by goblins before you know it. So she was just off there all by herself, and so they captured her. And the thing about Serena as a character was that she was quite stoic. She came from like a battle-hardened tribe that did something or other. There was some kind of background that was set up for the character. But they captured like one of the most stoic party members in the group, like not someone who is going to be like super receptive to negotiation and conversation. But the goblins took her back to their tribe, which it turned out was right where they were supposed to go. I think the place was called Charland or something like that, and it was a ruined wood elf city that had gotten sacked during the wars. And so the skeletons had moved out, and then goblins had moved in, because no one else was living here now. So the forest goblins just lived in this place. They converted it over into a goblin home. So all the tree homes and everything like that were now covered in like goblin stuff, you know, like bones and other things like that. So there were a bunch of goblin shamans, and they were all they decided that they needed what they'd actually done is they were like, we need to go and we need to get like somebody to help us with the problem, because in the night and sometimes during the day, I believe it was only in the day. It was during the day. During the day, you could hear in the distance these very loud noises, like just sounding like, you know, thumping and whatever. And what the goblins thought it was, they thought it was some kind of horrible giant. They weren't really sure what it was. It was scary. Like they'd had scouts go out and they described like there were gnomes with a horrible steel, like a horrible mechanical giant thing, and they didn't know what it was. It was just they were just like, oh, I don't know, it's a giant thing. It's super scary. Like if you go and you make that stop, then we'll give you a reward. But if you don't do it though, and then they put a curse on Serena. So they were like, if you don't do it, you'll die. And I believe that Serena wasn't very perceptive as far as like picking up on social cues, and so it was one of those things that was like, are they lying? Like, do the goblins really have the ability to put like a permanent curse on me that'll kill me if I don't like cooperate with them? And so like it took the roll on like Arcana, and it was just like one of those like, you have no idea, like you're not sure, like you've never met a goblin shaman in your life before, like you don't know if that kind of magic exists, like maybe. So Serena was able to regroup with the other people. And she explained to them the situation where the goblins had this fear of this thing that these gnomes were doing in the forest, and they were supposed to put a stop to it. And at some point in here, I don't think it was at this point, the party eventually fell into meta bickering, and this is one of the things that like I brought up when I was talking about why D&D cannot be as good of a system. I think once people are comfortable with role playing and they know what they're doing, it's good to get away from the non-homebrew stuff. Like for a GM, you know, it's probably better to just stick to the monster manual for a while. But we started to get into the meta of the game, and there was like a multi-hour argument about whether or not they were level 2 at this point, 12 level 2 characters could kill an entire village of goblins. And at some point I had to interject and point out that I wasn't using, like I think I had to do this multiple times, where I had to tell them that I wasn't using goblins from the monster manual, because I don't own the monster manual and I have no idea what goblins are supposed to do. I pointed out, I was like, yeah, I mean like some of the goblins are actually like magically potent in some way, like not to let you don't use out of character information to make your decision, but you're already using metagaming to make your decisions. And the point is, like, there's like actually shaman there. They might have actual spells, like maybe like they're a leveled class or something like that. I don't know. Like maybe just possibly I designed them not to be completely wiped out by you guys immediately. And so it just became a multi-hour thing. And this is terrible because actually this happens in a lot of D&D games if you're using monsters from the monster manual, where players will recognize what the monster is, and they will just check with the DM. They'll be like, okay, I rolled to see if I know what the monster... I rolled to see if my character knows what the monster is. And the GM, you know, will either let them have it or not. And the trouble is, like, if you as a person know what the monster is, then you know what it's going to do. And then you have to decide in your head, like, what would be the most logical. Like, I know that this creature is going to charge or turn me to stone because those are the only two things that it can do. So if I prepare myself for either of those things, it's like metagaming because I know the meta of this creature. But if I don't do it, like, I mean, like, there are probably cues that it's going to do. Like, should I... Like, I don't know, it gets to where it can be hard to separate your personal knowledge from your knowledge of, like, the monster manual and stuff like that. But this was just full-blown metagaming. This was, like, the worst kind of role-playing. This was just objectively what... You know, when most people talk about, like, man, like, this was metagaming. Like, this was really metagaming. Like I say, a multi-hour argument about what goblins are capable of. On the assumption that all the goblins that I made were going to be identical to a book. They were going to be identical to monsters that I had never read about, and I didn't know what they were supposed to be able to do. I mean, I'm pretty sure the book didn't have, like, any listings for, like... poisons or like blow darts, or for goblins to do, like, I don't know, there's like all kinds of things that goblins can do in the book. I had no idea. I was just making it up. They were totally homebrewed goblins. So yeah, multi-hour argument passed at some point during all this. It was like the group hit a snag at deciding what to do. And it wasn't that it only happened the once. It got to be multiple hours that were racked up, because every time the party came to a challenge, they kept coming back to what would be easier, to solve this problem or to go back and just like roll dice at the goblins until they're all dead through attrition. That was kind of where they were at. They were like, yeah, I mean, like, we all have higher AC than what most of the goblins can hit. You know, like, we have spells that'll hit more than one goblin. Like, we can totally kill goblins. Goblins are like, what, a CR 1/8 encounter? Something like that. They were using, like, all this logic. I didn't even know what challenge rating was at the time, so they were like, yeah, it's like CR 1/8, and I was like, what is CR? Like, I'm pretty sure the Goblin Shaman would be able to handle at least, like, one or two of you guys on their own. It's fine. So, anyway, though, the bickering aside, and like I say, that was especially bad with 12 players, when a lot of them... And this led to some problems in the game later, because I had a couple of people then giving me crap for that. Like later on, like they were contacting me after the game, and they were like, "Oh, Greg, you know, it really sucked that you didn't have these goblins be like they're supposed to. Like that's really cheap. That's like it's a really low blow. That like, you know, you set us up with this thing and it should have been winning, but you tricked us because your goblins aren't from the monster manual." And it was, man, that was like really infuriating too, to have somebody like giving me shit like after the game, to be like, "Oh, Greg, really sucks that you homebrewed these goblins." It's like, I don't own the monster manual. What was I gonna do besides homebrew them? So anyway though, all that aside, what wound up happening is they went to go find the gnomes, and they actually found the gnomes, and the group then they juggled back and forth between who could we kill the easiest, and they didn't know, because like the gnomes were all like armed, but they assumed that, you know, like gnomes, this was the funny thing, is that gnomes are player characters. So the group was really wary about attacking like a bunch of lightly armed gnomes. Like the gnomes were armed to defend themselves from woodland creatures. They weren't really armed to defend themselves from like a goblin attack force, or like a party of 12 player characters. They really, like, just looking at them, I was like, does it look like they could, like, does it look like they're very heavily armed? They were asking. I was like, oh, they've got like a bunch of crossbows and stuff like that. I didn't say like you can take them or anything like that. I was just like, yeah, it's just a bunch of gnomes with like crossbows. Like they're out in the woods. You're not sure what they're doing, but it looks like they've got a lot of technical equipment. And what they had, it was kind of like a large drill sort of device. And what they were doing is it started the drilling process with like a high impact feature, and then used a lot of magic. And I believe that it was using a hydraulic pressure kind of thing. It was kind of similar to fracking. And they were looking for something very specific, and this had a great deal of game relevancy. But the party didn't really ask them, or they didn't, I think they tried to ask them a little bit about what they were doing, but there was a certain amount of confidentiality with the whole thing, and they didn't roll high enough on persuasion to really drag it out of them. So they were like, yeah, what are you doing? Like, tell us about what you're doing. And they're like, oh, you know, we're drilling for holes. Like, this is a kind of survey project. We're just doing some, you know, we're just looking for resources. And so the party was like, oh, okay, that's cool. And so they were like, can you stop? And the gnomes were like, well, I mean, we can't stop. I mean, like, we've been hired to do this thing. Like, if we stop, then some other gnomes will come out and do it in our stead. And, you know, we'd all rather get paid. So the party they didn't really come up with a very convincing reason to not work with them. And so then they fell back. They went back and they fell back on this, like, who could we handle easier, like gnomes or an entire village full of goblins? And the thought process, the argument that came up is they were like, well, you know, like gnomes are PC characters, so who knows what, they could all be level 20 gnomes for all we know. Like, you can't just look at a gnome and know what level character it was. Like, how would you guess? Like, would there be any way to guess? And the goblin, they were like, but goblins though, goblins are CR 1/8, and I kept trying to tell them. Like, I didn't want to explicitly tell him, but I'm pretty sure, like, the shaman I had decided were, like, level 4, and they were essentially, like, sorcerers. So they were, like, level 4 sorcerers. Then there was, like, a council of shaman. So the party was considering, like, attacking a council of level 4 sorcerers or something like that. And they were just like, yeah, no, it's fine. CR 1/4, like, CR 1/8, CR 1/4, CR whatever it says in the monster manual. Like, we can handle that. But these gnomes, I mean, who knows? And so, like I said, it was funny. Like, I explicitly used these spells, and it was like, oh, I don't know, these spells might be beyond your comprehension. And there's like a good 100 goblins, like, off in these woods. Like, this is an entire village of goblins. And then they were just, you know, like, PC. Like, I don't know, if a player race could be anything. They could be level 6. They could be level 20. They're just like, guys, I mean, like, what if the goblins have a level, like, and they were just like, that would be so cheap, like, that's such bad GMing. I was like, So yeah, so we fell back to that, where they went back and forth trying to figure out who could they kill easier. And they didn't really want to approach from the social option. This was kind of like, I in the past I played with very, very social role players, like situations where, like, everybody would kind of have some kind of input or something that they would want to do. But in this particular game, it wound up being that we had maybe like 1 or 2 characters who were rather social, and one of them was Lyman the halfling. And Lyman wound up being kind of the face for the party, but they never really got truly organized. They eventually fell into that role, but I think it was a very long time before they actually ever did get a face, and they really had someone come forward and be like, okay, I'm the guy who talks for the party. So it was just kind of chaos. They kept kind of going back and forth, and they were like, I don't know, hey, you gnomes, like, like, what would you say if like I gave you a nickel, and then the gnomes would be like, I don't know, like, look, we're really busy. Can you guys, like, where are you going? Do you need directions or something? And they were like, no, we don't need directions. And they would leave, and then they would come back later, and they'd be like, you're like, how hard it would be to sabotage your device? And the gnomes are like, why? Like, all right, seriously, you're starting to freak us out a little bit. Just like, go away. And so finally, I think what they wound up doing was they resolved to tell the gnomes that there was a bunch of goblins in the woods that had a problem with them. And they were like, so you guys better pack up and deal with this later or something like that. And I think that's how the gnomes got persuaded to leave. It was a temporary solution, but it was a solution enough that, like, when they went back to go talk to the goblins made them wait for a while. Like, the goblins sent, like, little scouts to check it out and to wait to see if there were any more of the horrifying noises and everything like that. And they stopped. So after a couple of days, the goblins were like, okay, yeah, you guys are cool. You did your thing. I hereby lift the curse, and they do a little dance, and they lifted the curse. And so, like, the Goblin King then, the Goblin Shaman, he was their king. He says, so as a reward, I will hereby give you a goblin wife, I guess. And because I kind of like the wife thing, I thought it was funny. And what I thought the party was gonna do is I thought that they were gonna be like, oh no, I don't want the wife. And then the goblins were gonna be like, oh, okay, well, we've got these other things. And I was gonna actually give them, like, some treasures and reward. Like, I was gonna give them some stuff because they completed a thing. So I was gonna reward them, but they immediately turned around in disgust. I was like, I will give you a wife, and they were just like, ugh. And it was because Serena was female, and so I thought that was especially funny. Like, the goblin's like, yes, I'll give you a wife, and then she's gonna, like, I thought Serena would be like, oh, it's not gonna work, I'm female. And then the goblin shaman was gonna, like, squint really hard, and he was gonna be like, oh, okay, yeah, I wondered about the boobs. Well, I don't know, I've never met one of you dragon people. I assume that's where you stored the fire. But anyway, okay, yeah, I've got these other things if you want, like, these magical items, I guess, or this stuff, these things, these rewards. But the party just immediately turned around and left, except for the character Ader Flato. And Ader stayed behind, and the goblins were like, what are you doing? Like, what do you want? Everyone else left. And he was like, are you still giving away a wife? And the goblins were like, yeah, I mean, we don't want her. And so he was like, well, I do, I'll take her. And so they did a magical binding ritual. Like, the goblins didn't fully understand what marriage was. They just knew that other races, like, appreciated it, and it was a sign of friendship and bonding. Like, that was a thing that you got, you rescued the day, you get to marry the princess or whatever. So what they did is they just found, like, a goblin woman who nobody liked. She was, like, especially cantankerous among goblins, and they just used magic to, like, bind her to Ader. And it wound up being that she could complain as much as she wanted about, like, everything that was going on, but she was magically compelled to do anything that Ader requested. And so, like, Ader would tell her to do something, and she was always unhappy about it. Like, she was never happy with anything that he asked her to do, but she had to do it anyway. So he was like, I'll describe it. I was like, well, she's got a bunch of, like, jewelry and piercings, and, she's got, like, bones through her nose. And so he was like, oh, well, have her take those out. That's creepy and, like, unsanitary. And then she just complains, like, even my husband doesn't respect my culture. Like, I'm so mad at you, so angry. And so, like, she complained so much that he was like, well, okay, she can keep him in, I guess. And then she complains, she's like, my husband won't stand up for himself. Makes the decision, then goes back just because his wife henpecks him. What am I going to do? It's going to be a terrible marriage. I hate everything about this. And so, eventually, though, Ader and his goblin wife just became this weird kind of, like, this weird thing that just kept just, like, persisted throughout the game. It was like he didn't really Ader never even realized that his wife was compelled to do everything that he said. He thought that she was just, like, I don't know, he thought that she was just very passive. So he was, like, compelled to follow. She never brought it up. Like, no one asked her or anything like that about the magic ritual that was performed to marry the two of them. Like, because it was clearly a magic ritual, but nobody had stayed to watch or anything like that. So yeah, so the goblin woman was just, like, magically bound. But she'd kind of accepted her fate because the shaman told her to, and so she had to. So it was just like, like, she was just magically bound to be his slave, and he never really, like, treated her like a slave. He would just ask her to do things and she would do it, and then she'd get so mad about it that he would just, like, take it back and be like, well, it's fine, just do whatever you want. And she'd be like, well, okay, fine, I'll do whatever I want. So, yes, the Goblin wife. I can't even remember if she had a name. She did initially, but then no one referred to her as, like, her name. She just became the Goblin. So, just this Goblin woman that followed the party around from then on. And, yes. So, yeah, it was, that is a section of the game that I think is not remembered terribly fondly by the people that play it, just because that argument was, man, it was so not fun, and it was entirely predicated on a very flawed premise, and just on metagaming, you know, and yeah, for a good while, I don't think it was until they got to the desert that certain players really got over that either, because it was just like one of those things. It was like I brought people into a D&D game. And then I think that people the guys who had more experience with D&D, maybe they thought that they were going to have a fairly easy time because I don't know, like if you know D&D, then you know exactly what everything's going to do, and so it was just sort of like this upset that, like, oh, you know, how dare this not work the way that I think it does. And it's just kind of like, you know, I don't know, it's all homebrew. Like, when you guys met the rock troll, it wasn't really like a D&D rock troll. It was just a rock troll. It was just a thing that I made up that, you know, had whatever stats I thought it should have based on the fact that it was a great big rock troll. You know. Pixies were the same way. Everything was that way. Everything throughout the entire game was exactly the stats. It was exactly it wasn't anything from the D&D manual. But I don't know if it ever actually totally stopped. I believe I had to completely make up brand new monsters. Like, if people ran into things that they knew, that they recognized, that they were familiar with, I just kept getting that in D&D. Where, you know, people would be like, oh, so-and-so, you know, in the normal manual, this would be a whatever type of encounter, and this would be really dangerous. But in this setting, I don't know. I had to just start, like inventing monsters, like inventing creatures. I was like, yeah, this is the so-and-so abomination. Like, no one has seen this before, right? Because it's not in the D&D manual, right? And, you know, so that caused people to actually, like, try to slow down and maybe assess the situation. It's awful. D&D gets people in that mindset. Like I say, like, if you know what challenge rating every monster is, and, like, the GM goes like, oh, yeah, like a room full of 8 goblins, then, like, your players can just look at that and say, oh, that's a CR whatever encounter, you know, and we're all level whatever, so we should be able to handle that, and they'll just, like, charge in, you know, and do this, like, oh, it's a battle of attrition, like, I'm gonna fight this out. Or if they see it's like, oh, that's a CR whatever, that's a little above our heads, then they'll slow down and they'll make a plan, you know. But when they have no idea what it was, I was just getting that on occasions where I would have, like, yeah, goblins, and they'd be like, oh, that's a CR whatever, like, we should just be able to charge in and kill everything. I'm like, no, do that. But anyway, that's enough for today, so I suppose that'll be it for now. We'll keep going after this. There's another one that was very brief, and then they get right into the desert. But thanks for joining me, everybody. I will catch you all next time.